Looks like we're live. How's it going, guys? Deep dive into the world of mushrooms tonight. We're going to talk about medicinal mushrooms, edible mushrooms, and some of the incredible qualities of mushrooms that are a little bit lesser known, like the fact that they are well equipped to navigate space, to tolerate the radiation, to survive in a vacuum, and could have even seeded life on this planet. Really, just a tremendous, tremendous subject. In fact, when I was brushing up on factoids, it just really hit me all over again, fresh. The importance and the just incredible, incredible role that mushrooms play. Did I freeze in this other chat? No, okay, we're good. Looks like the other one just it says no data. Is that real? Anyways, as always, AMA open. If you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them at me. The bolete mushroom video that I just published, actually, we could start there. I started with those because they grow here and they're really, really prolific. And one of the things that I've noticed in the years and years that I've been foraging for mushrooms, I picked not only psychoactive ones, but I used to actually pick choice edibles on the Mendocino coast professionally, which was tremendous. It's one of the main things that I miss about living in California, going up into the hills in the rainy season. And there were black trumpets, hedgehog mushrooms, which is the only mushroom that has, they're like spikes. I don't know what they're called, but instead of gills, they have these, they almost look like thorns hanging down. They're amazing. They only grow under huckleberry. And you cannot eat them raw, which I found out the hard way because I got lost for 3 days and 4 nights, I guess, in November in the mountains of northern. It was cold. It was really cold. And I had no food or water. My lighter lit its last light as soon as I realized I was lost. Like I pulled it out and lit it, and it lit for a second and then went out and it was done. So I had not even a lighter. And at one point I found there's a variant of hedgehogs that is huge. And I found one of those and I was like, oh boy, because I didn't know you couldn't eat them raw. It's always advised to cook wild mushrooms, but not always necessary. So I took the mushroom cap and I squeezed it into my mouth and instant burning and misery. It's not poisonous, but there's like a peppery, acrid, miserable. I was thinking I'm going to get a big mouthful of mushroomy water and instead just agony. So don't do that. There were matsutake, which were prized by the Japanese. They used to be worth an absolute fortune. They grow all over the place there. Coral mushrooms, which look like coral. They can cause stomach upset in some people, but they're delicious if you can tolerate them. Hericium, lion's mane, and bearded tooth. I once found like 45 pounds of bearded tooth growing on a fallen log, which was just an incredible find. If you eat either one, lion's mane or bearded tooth, fresh, the plugs, when people grow them in plugs, the taste isn't there, I find. But if you find them in the wild and cook them with butter, salt, pepper, and garlic, it is like lobster. It's incredible. And we'll get into all the protective and neurogenerative aspects of that. But on top of it all, incredibly delicious. What else did we have there? Boletes. And that's where I first encountered boletes. Along the coast of Mendocino, there are gigantic king boletes everywhere in certain places. And they are really good. But in the course of making this video, I learned some things that I didn't know. The medicinal properties of slippery jacks, which, by the way, if you're in North America or Europe, they're very common everywhere. It turns out that they also have such powerful regenerative efficacy that they're being used to reverse psychosis in people that have gotten brain damage from syphilis. So we're talking about severe neurodegenerative conditions that can be helped with these very common mushrooms. They also apparently can stop migraine headaches. They are good for your heart and digestive issues. So the point kind of about the slippery jacks is that even these really common, kind of nondescript, lesser known mushrooms tend to have a tremendous amount of benefit. Another wonderful mushroom that I could find in California was the morel. And these are one of the most mystifying of all mushroom species. The first time I found them, a friend of mine and I had scoured this area, a pretty small area too, where we had heard they grew. We didn't see a single one. And as we're getting ready to leave, he looks down by my boot, and I see his eyes get all big, and he points, and there's a morel. And so we go back, and there are huge morels everywhere, like abnormally large. They call them Bigfoots, but usually you find a Bigfoot every once in a while. This entire patch was Bigfoots. And it made absolutely no sense that we had scoured this area and didn't see them. And so later, as I got more into this, I found out that's actually a very common experience, that people will go out looking for morels and they'll fail to see them. And then when they find one, they finally turn around and they're everywhere. It's really a trippy thing, you know, and you might think, well, your eye just hasn't adjusted to it, but I don't know that that's it. In fact, this happened with another species. They're not the most potent psilocybin containing mushroom in the world. On average, they are. Psilocybe Liberty Cap, basically, is the most potent single specimen, but on average, azarescens are. They also have a strange quality of paralysis that they cause, a temporary paralysis. I didn't know about that until after I ate them, which was really scary. But anyways, there was another case of that. I was in the sand dunes of Washington on the peninsula, crawling around this area, didn't see anything. Walked out to the sidewalk. There was a dried one somebody probably dropped on the street. And I was like, oh, they are here. And I go back in, and I had been on my hands and knees. The entire area that I had been crawling on, hands and knees, was blanketed in azarescens that I didn't see until I spotted this single one. So, you know, just a kind of cute little antidote. See, I'm certified for wild mushrooms. Nice. Get some lion's mane. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that because building the brain is I mean, it almost sounds dumb to say it. You know, this is a high priority for any person. In fact, one of the reasons for the bolete video is that I'm putting together a series on foods and supplements that enhance cognition. The most important of which is colloidal gold. There have been a number of studies done at this point. Basically, the science behind it is this. Gold is a superconductor. It is found in the brain. If you want to get mystical about it, which I do, consciousness comes to us via light, in my opinion, which comes to us from the sun, right? And gold comes from stars. Something like 90% of the gold in the universe comes from the collision of neutron stars, which are like 115 yards across, but a spoonful weighs more than Kilimanjaro. Really a tremendous spectacle to behold, I would imagine. But when this happens, they just basically spray gold and platinum and other heavy elements all over the universe. And so we could go down this rabbit hole forever because a lot of ancient cultures knew that gold came from stars and they associated it with consciousness and light. But that's a tale for another day. The relevance for us right now is that there is this connection between light and consciousness and gold. And there is gold in your brain. And up until, I don't know if it was like a year or more ago, it was believed that quantum processes could not occur in the brain because it's too noisy and wet. But then there was evidence otherwise, and now we know that neurons emit entangled biphoton pairs, microtubules emit photons, so there is light activity in the brain. Gold is not a superconductor unless it's at the critical temperature that makes it superconductive, unless it's hit by light. So, the processing power in the brain is suspected by many to have something to do with this interaction of gold as a superconductor and light. So, adding gold to your brain is smart, and studies now support that. Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases are being treated with it. It improves memory, cognition, and mood. So I have basically engineered a diet around all of these things, and I am scouring the earth for other constituents that can contribute to this. But so far, the main brain boosters are LSD wins in terms of psychedelics, actually, in terms of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis enhancement, followed by psilocybin. And then lion's mane mushroom is so efficacious at neurogenesis that they are using it successfully to slow and possibly even reverse dementia. And then a lot of you guys probably know about the Stammet stack. Niacin is believed to have the ability to sort of prune dried and withered neurons from the brain. And this happens from alcoholism, depression, and various other things. Interestingly, though, that may not be necessary because at Johns Hopkins University a while back, researchers observed those, they're not dead, they're more like in a state of suspension, these brain cells, but they were thought to be impossible to rejuvenate until patients who had been given psilocybin and also I think in situ or in vitro were in a petri dish with brain cells. They were observed to rejuvenate. Psilocybin rejuvenates those shriveled neurons to such an extent that they are thinking they may be able to rejuvenate brain dead patients with psilocybin. So, colloidal gold and a combination of various mushrooms. Simple, but incredibly effective at enhancing your mind. All right, I feel like I got kind of distracted down some rabbit holes. Don't forget you guys can contribute questions about this. So should we talk about mushrooms in space? I actually made some notes so that I don't end up. A lot has happened today, so I'm a little bit overwhelmed. It's not bad, but very unexpected and shocking. Oh, yeah, there's an interesting aspect of mushrooms we can riff on for a bit. The neural network, like structure and function of them, they act as a bridge between the human organism and the universal mind, in my opinion, and in the opinion of just about anyone who's taken a large dose of them. There is a feeling of being in communication with something other, and it has a very distinct personality compared to other entheogens. DMT has its character, its aesthetic, the personality of the entities that people encounter. It's very consistent from person to person, and even though the beings might manifest as different archetypes, there's still this sort of underlying conceptual continuity that ties them all together, right? And mushrooms have this elvish, impish kind of interstellar personality, and that sort of Hermes-like function as a bridge between the mind of humans and whatever it is, this cosmic giggle that mushrooms connect us with. They actually serve that role in general in nature. The networks that are used by trees to and something just occurred to me that I'll get to in a second. I have to process this and then I'll continue. Man, that is trippy. Trees and other organisms will sort of use them as a mechanism of communication so that they can engineer mineral and what are they called? The microorganisms in a little cocktail to heal injured relatives and whatnot. And I just almost found a hole in one of the theories I've been promoting. It's not really a hole exactly. It's more of like an analogy or something. But one of the things I talk about a lot is how there's all this evidence of non-neural cognition all of a sudden throughout nature. There always has been, in my opinion, but we have actual scientific hard data type evidence of this at this point. And so if you've ever seen mycelium, you notice that it has a striking resemblance to neural networks. And it just occurred to me that we've been saying that these trees are communicating with each other without neurons, but that's not entirely true. The mycelium functions as their neural network. So they do have a neural network, but it's just not part of that organism. The neural network is a different organism, which, which is a wonderful kind of thought. I'll have to kind of process that a bit more, and maybe something else will emerge from it. It also reminds me of the microcosm macrocosm thing, and also the shamanic view of the universe. And I actually trailed off when I was talking about morels, and this reminds me of it. One of the ways that a shaman or a healer in indigenous culture is able to find the right medicines in the forest or wherever they happen to be is clues that nature gives us. And this is another great example of evidence of a universal mind to me, some sort of intelligence in nature, right? Nature knows something is looking. If it didn't, why would it have all these visual signals? And the visual signals can communicate even complex ideas, right? It's not like it's just yellow poisonous or, whatever the signal is. Sangre de Drago is a tree that when you cut it, it bleeds, looks like blood, the latex, and it has been studied, and the researchers said that it helps the blood to rebuild damage in tissues to a degree that defies scientific understanding. It looks like blood, helps the blood. Digestive issues, another tree has a white latex, looks like mother's milk. There is a small tree that's used to treat Dos Equis bites, and it looks like the skin of a Dos Equis, the skin of this tree. So, when you're looking for mushrooms also that help the brain, or if you're trying to understand the function of something that you see in nature, this kind of knowledge works. It actually works. And the morels are a great example of that. When I first encountered them, I noticed a couple of things. One of those things is that once you have eaten them, people become obsessed with them. They are delicious. They're probably the best tasting mushroom. In fact, I make a dish that is white wine reduction with cream, cracked pepper, Asiago and Parmesan cheese, angel hair pasta, bacon, scallops, wild asparagus if I happen to be in Colorado and can get it, which is much better than domesticated asparagus, actually. And what else goes in there? Asparagus? Whatever. Yeah, it's really, really good. In fact, every person I've ever made it for has said it's the best thing they've ever put in their mouth, and I believe them. But I noticed that people really, it's not like an addiction, but people really get this like obsession with them. And on top of that, I noticed that your mood improves, like not a high, but you're always really happy after eating morels. And looking at them, I thought they look like brains, and I bet this logic applies. But I checked online at the time, and there had been no studies. So we were going to do a morel event a couple of months ago, and I had some issues, and we couldn't do it. By the way, we're still trying to raise money for those surgeries, and we're a demonetized channel. So if you appreciate the content, you can consider supporting us. Join the Patreon. You get access to premium content. And there are options to make a one-time contribution in the chat. So I was thinking about morels again, and I checked online, and it turns out that I was correct, that they have L-DOPA or other precursors or prodrugs for, happy, happy chemicals for the brain, dopamine and whatnot, and all sorts of other cognitive benefits and general benefits for the entire body. It turns out they're one of the most medicinal mushrooms known to man. And that explains a lot about how we react to them when we eat them and the sort of intuitive drive that our subconscious sends to us that continue consuming these, please. But the particular thing is for the brain and mood. And they look like brains. So let me check in with the chat again and see. Cheers, my friend. Voiden Law. Talk a little bit about the semen retention. No, I can't because I don't know anything about that. I don't really buy into it. Anything that kind of sounds like, is it asceticism? It's probably the word, right? I'm not a fan. Yeah, it's not something I've thought about. It's not something I've researched, and it's really not even something I'm interested in. So, yeah, I don't have any insights or knowledge on that. But I wanted to just touch on all of these, like overarching themes with the mushrooms. We talked about the mycelial networks and then how they, have all these benefits from the brain. And it seems the more I research just regular edible mushrooms and the more research is done, it seems that this is a common theme, that they just generally have cognitive benefits. You guys probably know that we share something like 90% of our DNA code with them. What else? The largest organism in the world is a gigantic fungus underneath of, I think, Washington State. The interstellar thing is pretty interesting because spores are coated with one of the hardest organic substances known. They have been found in outer space, and they have the ability to withstand radiation, to survive in a vacuum. And so the possibility that Earth was originally seeded by mushrooms and this panspermia thing, that spores are actually the seed that possibly came here on a meteor that gave rise to life on Earth, which is pretty wild and interesting. And it would also explain maybe the feeling of having this phone that you can call a sort of alien entelechy and tap into it with. So that is something to think about. And then on the subject of psilocybin mushrooms, I mean, I'm sure all you guys are really well versed. I don't really feel like it's probably going to be very meaningful for anyone for me to go through all the benefits or anything of those. I'm sure you guys are all well aware. I'm sure you all understand how they work with neuroplasticity and neurogenesis enhancement, but I do have something for you that you might not know. And these are actually incorporated into our retreat events in April in Sacred Valley, May in the jungle of Manu, and July, late June, early July in Sacred Valley again. Psilocybe natalensis is a relatively newly discovered psilocybin mushroom from South Africa. For those of you that might be living in a place where it is legal to do so, they're very easy to grow and they consume contaminants. So if you grow mushrooms and you get anything in the substrate, in the material that the mushrooms are growing on, you have a problem. And generally, it's a done deal. There's no saving. Once you see blue, green, gray, anything other than mycelium in your jars, it's a waste. You're done. You got to throw it away. In this case, the mycelium will oftentimes roll right over it, suck it up, and apparently use it as food. And there's no other psilocybin mushroom species known that can do that. So that is very helpful. There are 2 times, and by some estimates, even more than 2 times, as potent as Psilocybe cubensis. They also cause very little nausea or body load and indigestion. They're very highly digestible somehow, and they don't really make you sick. The experience is far more clear and less, like at higher doses, you don't tend to get overwhelmed and confused. The mind doesn't become scattered. You maintain a tremendous amount of clarity. In fact, there have been a couple of times where I was playing guitar and I'd eaten a relatively large dose, and I just for a second I thought, wait, they're not even working. And then I looked around the room and there's pulsing geometries, and just because you're able to just maintain perfect lucidity. Bad trips, according to most users, are a non-thing. Really just the absolute best mushrooms on Earth, without question. The only ones that give it a run for the money are Pinnaeus cyanescens, which I also like a lot. And they're similar in that sense. They're very, very strong, and they don't really have any body load, very light. Actually, that leads me to another little rivulet. A few years back, it might be 5 by now or something, It was discovered that there are harmala alkaloids in psilocybin mushrooms, and harmala alkaloids are the same compounds that exist in ayahuasca and Syrian rue, in Banisteriopsis caapi and Syrian rue. They are the constituents of the brews made from those plants, I believe, that are the fundamental mechanism that causes the telepathic experiences and other parapsychological phenomena that's associated with ayahuasca and has been forever. But it's real. It's definitely real, 100% real. And I've also experienced that. The first time I ever experienced telepathy to the degree that it was absolutely undeniable, my girlfriend was a mile away on top of a mountain, and I had this experience. And when she found me, she knew everything I had been doing. She knew what kind of dog I stopped to pet. She knew a tear had run down from my eye. She knew every single word of every thought that went through my head for over the course of 35 or 40 minutes or something. It was crazy. And we had just eaten like maybe 3/4 of a gram of cubensis each. And yeah, I know there's an association. And this is not a unique experience. This is something that people report. And of course, the skeptic says, okay, yeah, whatever, you're on mushrooms, so you think you're telepathic. Part of the reason, the actual mechanism for this, I think we actually know. And it's that the mind has reducing valve, as Aldous Huxley termed it, that filters out other people's brainwaves and all sorts of sensory input so that we can manage our experience on this earth without getting overwhelmed. That's why we see less than 1% of the full spectrum of light, because we would be completely overwhelmed and blinded by all the radiation everywhere if we could see it all. I also suspect, by the way, that we have visual information on the visible spectrum that we use for seeing, but these other spectrums of light contain other types of information. And that's why when our filters are down, we tend to have all these revelations and people have precognitions and all this sort of thing. It's because you get information of a different type from the other spectrums of light. And so what I was long-winded way of saying that the discovery of those harmala alkaloids in the mushrooms could help to explain these parapsychological experiences. That is a thing that they have in common. However, I think it could just be psychedelics, because the Grateful Dead built their career on that kind of psychedelic-induced telepathy, and I know for certain that it's a real thing too, and there's no harmala alkaloids involved. So anyways, just a theory. But that's interesting also, that these harmalas exist in the mushrooms, and it explains why the mushrooms have different types of effects. There's some argument about this. Some people say that because there's different, what did you eat today? What was your experience the entire month? You know what I mean? There's all these different factors that can cause you to have a different experience if you consume any psychedelic. And so they kind of write off the difference in the experience as that. I don't think that's true at all. If you eat Liberty Caps, for example, your body feels light and springy. There is more of an auditory component to it than other types. It's just, and also wood rotters have a different experience than coprophilic or dung-loving mushrooms. Azaretins and cyanescens, psilocybe, are nothing like cubensis. I mean, they're something like them, but it's markedly different. And the presence of different ratios of harmalas and an entourage effect could explain that, in case you were curious about the reasons for the variations of experience in different psilocybin mushrooms. Sorry, I was looking at my notes trying to make sure. Bioluminescence is an interesting quality of some mushrooms, but we don't really know what kind of relevance that has to us in terms of any kind of effect biologically or psychologically. Oh, this is an interesting one. Mind control, right? We talk about, hold on, let me check in with the chat again, because I guess it's been a second. Mind control. We've been talking about non-neural intelligence and how mushrooms the mycelium, looks like a brain, a neural network, and actually functions like a neural network for other species, which is wild, really wild. But what about the fact that they can control the minds of other species? This is something that a number of parasites can do. And it raises a lot of really interesting questions. People have suggested the possibility that, like, there was a guy that crawled up to the top of a tower and shot a bunch of people. That these kind of things could be the product of brain parasites. And a lot of people like to invoke parasitical entities to explain their bad behavior. But that's not really necessary. We have enough parasites that might be capable of that already on the earth. So, in some of the more interesting cases, these parasites are able to actually hijack the nervous system of an organism and make them do things that aren't scripted in their genetics, right? There's a crab that will raise the larva and care for the eggs of this parasite, and it's totally unnatural behavior for a crab. So the parasite hijacks the other organism's consciousness and puppets it, basically. There's another one that gets into ants, and it makes them climb to the top of a blade of grass and cling to it until the sun comes up, and then it'll let it have its mind back because it's a liver fluke and it wants to get into a cow. But mushrooms doing it is a little bit different because in the case of these parasites, we have some neurons, and we have an organism that at least has some function anyways. It can swim around, it can walk, it can mate, it can do all these things. A mushroom we think of as just an organism that just sits there. It doesn't do anything. And so if you really think about a cordyceps mushroom hijacking the behavior of an ant in order to spread spores, that really raises some questions about the cognitive capacity of the mushroom. And if it doesn't raise questions about the cognitive capacity of the mushroom, it raises questions about the cognitive capacity of nature. It indicates a universal mind. And so either way, it does, because if you have an organism that has no neurons, that is able to hijack another organism's nervous system, there's no need for a brain in order to have consciousness, or at least cognition. So, fun stuff. And then, of course, I should mention at least, let me check in with the chat one more time and see if we have any questions or suggestions for where can one get a spore print? Online. I mean, you can join Reddit groups and whatnot and find a good lineage of, I'm assuming you're talking about the Psilocybin nettlensis. Yeah, in fact, I plan to eat a handful of them on Sunday. So the other subject I was planning to get into, and we're not going to end up going very late tonight, I guess, if you guys don't have questions or subjects to toss out there, because I just wanted to give an overview of the value of these things and talk about a couple particular species and tie it all into the universal mind, because that's kind of my main thrust here on this channel. The other thing is, the mushrooms as stewards of the environment. It's really an incredible thing that they are able to clean up oil spills, and possibly we could use them to process the refuse piles that we have created. And there are other applications that are being looked at. And as we develop the ability to engineer organisms, whether that's wise or not, there are people that are considering radiation. They can clean up radiation. But there are people considering weirder applications. Like there is so much cocaine in the Thames that it's testing positive with like a standard drug test. The ocean's testing positive for benzodiazepines. So as of the current moment, it's possible to clean up, nuclear explosions and oil spills and to dispose of plastic refuse and an expanding number of environmental steward linked applications. But as we develop our understanding of this, it looks like we might be able to clean up anything and everything with these fungal allies of ours. And if observing nature is an indicator for us, this is how we learn. If you're looking at the world through shamanic lenses, when you see this organism behaving in this way, it tells you that if you put it into your body, it's probably going to do the same thing. So, that all went a lot faster than I was expecting. I mean, we could talk about chanterelles and how incredibly delicious they are. I didn't talk about the azarescent paralysis. All right, we'll do this, and I'll check back in with the chat. And if you guys have got anything for me, then we'll work through that. And if not, then I will play guitar because tomorrow I'm going to do a music stream for many hours, and then Friday we're going to get political again. And some part of me hesitates to do that, but another part of me knows that it is absolutely important. And a lot of people have suggested that I shouldn't do it because they're like, "Can you really afford it?" And it's like, okay, but if we allow that dollar control to silence us, then we are the machine. So no, I'm not going to shut up about it. What was okay? So the azarescent paralysis. This is weird, and I think we still don't have an answer. I don't know how I missed this because I've been studying psychedelics of all kinds since junior high school, maybe even the last year of elementary school. I can't really remember. I know I was actually earlier than that I encountered the Flowering Plants book and started reading that. So that had definitely happened in elementary school. So I've been reading about this stuff forever, and I had never encountered anything about this. So I was on the West Coast, and I knew I was in azarescent territory. And so we went to the beach, and eventually we found tons of them. I mean, I bet with the popularity of psychedelics now, they're getting wiped out, which is a sad thought. But they were everywhere. I mean, just like thousands and thousands and thousands of them all over the sand dunes, all over the place, around Astoria and all up and down the peninsula. They can also be found in the Columbia River Gorge, but man, those beaches on the peninsula were crazy. And so we collected a bunch of them and went back and ate them. And towards the end of the experience, I was eating a banana, and suddenly my jaw just didn't work. And I had all this banana in my mouth. And so I had to take my hand and use it to operate my jaw until I could chew the banana sufficiently to swallow it, right, and mush it with my tongue and stuff. But then I couldn't tell my partner at the time what was wrong because I couldn't use my jaw. So she's kind of just like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, and so it finally went away, and I was like, "Man, what the hell happened?" That was really weird, but I didn't even necessarily connect it with the mushrooms, especially because it didn't happen to her. So the next day, we drive out to the beach to go for a walk, and we walk a little ways down the trail, and suddenly my leg stops working. And I'm like, "What the hell, man?" And she's like, "Oh my God, my arm doesn't work." So at this point, we're freaking out, and somehow it occurred to me to Google azarescent mushroom paralysis, and there's all this stuff, and so no one knows what causes it. I haven't checked in a few years. Let's look and make sure this is still true, actually. I have a theory, and if there is no answer, I'll tell you what the theory is. Azarescent paralysis. Wood lovers paralysis. I guess cyanescens do it as well. I guess the wood lovers in Australia cause it the worst. Subaraganosa is the Australian one that does it. Okay, so the answer is still not extant. So I will give you what I think could be the answer. There is a third compound in azarescens and cyanescens, and probably I would be willing to bet in sarraganosa and others, but in all of the other mushroom species, it's minimal. There's tiny, 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 like less than 0.1% or something of the, and it is believed to be psychoactive. Now, I could debunk this pretty easily, and after the stream, I will check. It just didn't occur to me to see if anyone's ever consumed it alone, just, extracted it or synthesized it and consumed it. But there is like 10,000 times as much or something in azarescens, like crazy, crazy high. So the variable, the thing that is in the azarescens and the cyanescens, although to a lesser extent, and cyanescens have never done this to me, is baeocystine. And I also think that, like, when you take azarescens and cyanescens to a lesser extent, there is similar to the natalensis, but different. The colors have different hues, and the geometries and the movement of things is definitely distinctly different and much more clear, but not just mentally, also in terms of the way the visions appear. So my suspicion is that baeocystine is what causes the paralysis in the wood rotters, but that could be. Actually, we can do that right now. Let's see. See if it has been consumed. So it's 4-phosphorylloxy in methyltryptamine, 5-PO NMT. Um, oh no, it has been given to people. It caused gentle hallucinogenic experience, and it doesn't look like any of them reported any kind of paralysis. So my theory may be bunk. In which case, that is really odd that there is not some alkaloid that is readily identifiable that can explain this weird paralysis. And it's not damaging, it doesn't do any harm, it goes away after a few hours. It can happen again the next day, apparently, because that's what happened to us. So that's interesting. Can you dive into San Pedro as well tonight? Like the variation in effect between different cactus brew tips? I've heard that the paralysis is caused by a couple different species. Yeah, I'll talk about San Pedro for a second. Let's see. Also, they have found 5-MeO-DMT in Amanita. I've never heard about that. I mean, I believe you, but I've never heard of that. Have you heard of Acapulco, a conference held in Acapulco? No. Well, thank you. Put me in touch with them. Send me an email, and I'll look it up and see mushrooms, DMT, ayahuasca. Yeah, they are. And in fact, one of the things that I've noticed, my partners observed this as well, and she actually mentioned it to me before I mentioned it to her. So I had experienced it before anyone said anything about it, which helps, in case there's like suggestion. But after taking ayahuasca numerous times, mushrooms are never the same again. They're more like ayahuasca. The character of them changes. But the reason, pharmacologically speaking, that DMT and psilocybin are so close is that they are very closely related chemicals. I think it's 5-phosphoroloxy dimethyltryptamine. I can't believe I've forgotten this, so I'm going to look it up real quick. I'm pretty sure that's correct or close, but it's very, very. Yeah, four. It's 4-phosphoroloxy and dimethyltryptamine, 4-PO DMT. So it's DMT. It's an analog. you know. So yeah, astute observation, but chemically they are very, very similar anyways. Okay, so mescaline. Talking about the difference in the effect of the cactuses is a little bit tricky because it's not consistent, even from species to species. There are some things that are relatively consistent, like potency tends to fall within a range, but within any species, there is up to a 10x variation in potency from cactus to cactus. So you really can't say, I have, this Peruvian torch or this Ecuadorian echinopsis or whatever it is, trichoceros, whatever cactus. And I'm not an expert in the species or anything. I really don't think much about it. I just know what country I'm in, and I know what cactus I'm looking at based on that. But my experience is that you can't go by that very well. There are other characteristics that are very helpful though. One of them is that the Peruvian type, the cactus that we have here in the Sacred Valley, is not as gross to drink. It doesn't. The Ecuadorian cactus sticks on your tongue for hours after drinking it. Like you feel like a cactus. Like it permeates every cell of your body with this kind of slimy, gross, cactusy feeling, and I really hate it. I mean, it's enough to. I don't drink a lot of San Pedro because of this, really. And so the one here is it's milder generally. There's more light to it. The Ecuadorian cactus is more dark and you purge a lot more, But yeah, it's talking about the nature of the experience I can do, but comparing the cactus species is not really. Plus, I haven't eaten them all. I've had the two basically from Ecuador and Peru. So I haven't had the Bolivian torch and some of the weirder varieties from other countries. And I'm trying to think like really how profoundly different the experience is, and I don't think it's really dramatic. The main thing is that it's of a character that is completely different from the rest of the classical psychedelics. And part of the reason is that it's a phenethylamine. It's not really in the same family as LSD and DMT and psilocybin. It's more closely related to mescaline, ephedrine, and MDMA than it is to LSD. And so it's kind of like a very psychedelic ephedrine. It is extremely stimulating. It can last. I've had it keep me and a client awake. We drank a lot, but it kept us awake for several days. I don't think we slept for 2 full nights after. And we did drink late, I guess, again in the afternoon on the 3rd day, but still, it can last an extremely long time. The toxicity is much higher than the other psychedelics I mentioned, but still not really dangerous unless you would really have to try. There's been one overdose death from mescaline, and I believe he consumed 50 grams, and I think he did it on purpose. Let's look this guy up because that was a wild thing. Let's see, mescaline fatality. Yeah, the LD50 is 880 milligrams per kilogram. So, yeah, good luck. Good luck. One of the things that you have to be really aware of, though, is that it takes, if you drink San Pedro, it takes up to 3 hours for it to really fully manifest its effect. And so if you get impatient and you start drinking more, and also a mistake that people make is that the visuals aren't as strong, so they think it's not that strong, but your mind is affected and you don't notice it as much because it's also a different kind of effect. And if you take too much San Pedro, that is another thing about the cactus here. The blackouts seem to not happen as much. The cactus in Ecuador, it caused a lot of blackouts. If you drank a little bit too much, you would phase in and out of awareness, but your body would continue doing stuff and running around, and it happens quite a bit. So that seems to be like way less of a concern with the species that we have here. The Peruvian torch. Where was I going with that though? Well, that was where I was going with it. You have to be careful. You have to be patient if you're not experienced. You know, a problem for people in the United States, I think, is that for me, I'm working with the same cactus, like the same individual cactus, and so you take a little bit every once in a while, and it grows back before you need to harvest again, unless you are some commercial greedy lunatic. But generally, it's possible for a single person, even working with a small group occasionally, like I do, uh, to work with the same exact cactus, and that way I know, I use this much, I boil it down this much, and then I know exactly what it is. In the United States, you don't have that option unless you have huge cactuses in your backyard. So, I sympathize with people that have to kind of play a little bit more roulette, because if you overshoot, it's up to 18 hours and you could black out. And so what I'm trying to communicate here is that if you're inexperienced, you definitely should have some oversight of some kind. Yeah. Aside from that, the experience has a lot more to do with intellect and cerebral things and constant bombardment of information. At very high doses, it's a very common experience to become a single photon or a monad in an infinite sea of trillions and trillions of similar particles that are also tesseracts that you can like zoom in on just by thinking, like you draw them with your mind, and then you can kind of see them more closely and examine them. And you are one of those things in this sea of light. It is an extremely common high dose experience. So it is basically a dialogue with the light. In fact, one of my pet theories is that our consciousness comes to us from the sun, and that even if that isn't directly true, during periods of intense solar activity, there is an excitation and greater symmetry to the particles in our electromagnetic field, right? And so my belief is that, and that is also Rupert Sheldrake believes this, and every ancient culture ever pretty much also has this opinion, I guess. But so the group that we're going to have in July, we're going to load our brains up with colloidal gold over the month before the event, and then we're going to go very, very high to the highest altitude we can to an Incan holy place, and we are going to drink as high of a dose of San Pedro as we can safely consume. And I will find out what that is before we go, because we will all be consuming it in the week leading up to this. It will be like the peak of the event. And that's why, because I know that San Pedro is legitimately a portal to direct interaction with the light that is basically our soul and consciousness. So that's the nature of the beast. It's also an excellent way. Do most Peruvians have that bluish sheen? No, I don't know what you mean. Oh, you mean the cactus? Yeah, they do. I thought you meant the people. I was like, yeah, they're Smurfs, bruh. You have that synthase. What? Synthase pretty much. I don't know what that means. Definitely understand. Oh yeah, speaking of MDMA, another really relevant bit that I can offer on opinion on antidepressants and psychotherapy. Those are two completely different things, but sure, I'll talk a little bit about that. HHPD, or bad perspective on an afterglow. What? Okay, so one other relevant bit about San Pedro is that it is extremely good for couples. There is no better, calling it an aphrodisiac isn't quite the right word, although it fits. How would you say, like, to amplify? I don't know why my vocabulary just died on me, but you guys know what I mean. It accentuates things to a degree that is undescribable. And it's not just about like physical enhancement. There is a profound ability to communicate and to merge, I guess, would be an appropriate way of describing it. So, this is something I haven't seen a lot of focus on either. Is the, like or San Pedro as a tool for marriage counseling or such like things, but definitely incredibly effective for that. Highly recommended for couples. So, someone asked about antidepressants and psychotherapy. Antidepressants, I hesitate to say anything about um, anything medical on YouTube because I've gotten strikes for that. So this is not medical advice. This is purely the opinion of a person who does not have any sort of medical degree, and it is purely the opinion of a person. Algorithm, please do not strike me down. It's just my opinion based on my observations. Uh, you know, like RFK Jr., who I do not think is really sincere. But I think he may have a point. When you look at the data around school shooters, SSRIs, I think every single one of them was on them. And they say that that's irrelevant, that, it's just a coincidence and it's just an indication those people had mental problems. But the people with mental problems that aren't taking them don't seem to do this. And if they're such effective things, then why don't they stop them from doing these things? And then also, serotonin has been linked to aggression. And I saw an article recently from a reputable source, for sure, in CBI, saying that basically the function of serotonin and everything that that particular class of drugs did was made up, and it was all engineered to sell drugs, and that they're just a lie, and that the real focal point for that sort of chemical management of our depressive states is glutamate. The glutamate is actually the transmitter that does all the heavy lifting in that regard. And it has a close relationship with dopamine. And glutamatergic drugs, as opposed to serotonergic drugs, are becoming the focal point. And interestingly, a lot of like ketamine and some of the other newer, like, they're not classical psychedelics, but dissociatives that are being used therapeutically, they are this type of drug. And so there's actually a shift happening away from the serotonin management to the glutamate focus. And what I'm getting at with this is that there are natural ways to support that. Consumption of L-Dopa actually has a relationship, so you can take mucuna beans. They have another name. It's escaping me at the moment. Damn it. Really well known. Fava beans are another good source. But generally without putting myself at risk of getting deleted. Sorry, there's a gigantic spider on the wall, and I just got fixated on it for a second. I generally don't think that a lot of the conditions, in my opinion, that people get labeled with are treatable. In fact, I've done things with ayahuasca and Ajo de Monte. You guys would know it by a different name, but that's what we called it in Ecuador. I can't remember what it is. Ajo de Monte is Ajo Sacha. In regards to a condition that is deemed untreatable and uncurable. In fact, the person was still having seizures while on his pharmaceutical medication. Stopping that medication is supposed to, the withdrawals are worse and frequent seizures. And the second he started consuming this plant-based tea, he didn't have another seizure for in 9 months or something. And he only had another seizure because he did the one thing that I told him he could not do, which was use methamphetamine again. So he relapsed, and the epilepsy came back. So I'm kind of restricted in what I can say, I guess, because I really have to be cautious. I get in trouble for nothing. I'm barely tolerated on this platform, basically. but you probably get the point. You know that a lot of the conditions that we are told are that necessitate this kind of pharmacological management don't need it. And psychotherapy, it depends on what you mean. Is it effective? Sure, it is. The basic premise that if you determine what is the prima mobile of some aberration in your being, that some behavior that doesn't serve you, that in and of itself oftentimes is enough to neutralize the influence of that trauma. Just identifying it. This is why, the old fairy tales, the kids would realize the witch had cast a spell on them, and that would break the spell in and of itself. And it's not always that simple, but it definitely can be, to an extent that's surprising. And then beyond that, it's a place to start working from. So self psychoanalysis, even if you possess sufficient intelligence and the ability to be detached and objective in regards to yourself, which is something that most people struggle with. But you can even do it for yourself to an extent. So yeah, absolutely. And for me, psychedelic medicine is not just about psychedelics. It is about having a general determination to lift yourself up by means of anything available to you, by any and all means. And that means studying psychology to some extent, at least what you can ascertain is the most relevant to yourself. Philosophy, mathematics, geometry, all of this stuff. And those of you that follow me know that I come from basically a mystery school lineage where the initiate it is bound by oath, basically, to study everything that could possibly be relevant, as well as taking psychedelics and using different, I guess you could say, mind expansion techniques. So yeah, I say avail yourself of everything, but I don't have a lot of trust for big pharma or see the necessity for it. And the thing is, I could say a lot more based on actual stuff that I've witnessed, but I actually listen to this now. This is really important. And you might even want to know what I'm talking about. So if you really want to know, send me an email and I'll tell you. But I did a live stream a while back where I put the NCBI, which is a United States government funded medical research institution. They review and consolidate studies from what I understand, but definitely mainstream authenticated. I read this thing and I got a medical misinformation strike, and my channel was down for 2 weeks. It was on screen. I was reading from it on screen, and I can't even say what it was about. But if you want to know, trust me, you want to know. You want to know this. And the fact that even though I was using a legitimate U.S. government source as my source and put it on screen and I appealed and lost, tells you everything. It tells you everything. So yeah, let me check in with the chat again. Keystone said something about believing that the cactus gathers and stores energy they receive from listening to people speak. Maybe during San Pedro experiences, but the ones that I used to harvest in Ecuador, there was never any people around them. They were in the middle of nowhere. It's an incredible thing. There's video of it, Malacatos ancient San Pedro forest on the channel. They're massive. Some of them had, on average, they probably had like 30 arms, but there was one that got butchered. They cut it down for some reason. I have no idea why, because even the locals, the guy that brought me to them didn't know what I wanted them for. He lived in the neighborhood. He was a worker at our farm, and I saw this San Pedro, and I said, "Oh man, that's a big one." And he goes, "No, it's not." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he pointed at his tree, and he's like, "There's some as big as that tree up on the mountain." And I was like, "No, there isn't." And he's like, "Yeah, there is. I'll take you there." And I was like, "What?" All right. So we got his taxi, which was his donkey, and I followed him out into the mountains. And the first one is like you go down this little dirt road, and then all of a sudden there was this San Pedro just looming, like, I mean, 35 feet tall or something, maybe 150 arms. And if you think I'm lying, there's video of it on the ground, but you can see like it looks like it would cover a football field. It's insane. It's one cactus, and you can see the body of it on the where the fence was, and it looks like a tree trunk from like a giant oak or something. It was a San Pedro cactus. For some reason, one of the times I went back, they had cut it down. I don't think I have any video of it standing. But yeah, the ancient San Pedro forests of Malacatos is the video on my channel if you want to check it out. But yeah, they were massive, super potent, and they were just all over the side of this mountain, everywhere. It was really amazing to see. Those of you that are just dropping in, we're kind of in the question and answer phase of this stream. So, I mean, one other thing I don't think I really mentioned about the mushrooms, and I think you guys probably know this all already, but the adaptogen aspect of them, we didn't really discuss much. And there's not really a tremendous amount to say. It's just that I would hate for anyone to come to the stream and not be aware of that. And so the immunomodulators, reishi is a good example, and turkey tail contain polysaccharides that boost immune function and are studied for cancer support. Now, this is another thing that in doing research for the Slippery Jack video, I started to notice that this isn't reishi and it's not turkey tail. It's like everything. Probably to varying degrees, but boletes are not closely related to either of those things, and they have shown efficacy at reducing tumors and preventing cancer, and they also have immunomodulators and all of that. So, and also a neuroprotective thing. It seems like pretty much any mushroom that they put under the lens, with sufficient attention, they discover that they all have these capacities to reverse neurodegenerative damage, disease damage, and have immunomodulating effects, and you know what I mean? So another thing that I didn't mention when we were still talking about consuming mushrooms for health benefits, if at all possible, do not buy commercially raised mushrooms. Even from companies that, and I hate to say this because I'm sure there are lots of wonderful people out there that have escaped Babylon by sticking oyster plugs in a log and growing lion's mane. For one thing, lion's mane that's grown, that's farmed, does not. If you're eating it for food, it does not taste anything like the wild. Nowhere near. It's like styrofoam compared to the wild ones. And I know enough from being a pot farmer to understand what terpenes are. And it's not just about terpenes in mushrooms, obviously, but that quality, that taste, and that smell, those are indicators of underlying, chemical configurations and constituents and whatnot. So if you can do it, go find the mushrooms yourself if you are sufficiently educated in the processes. And a lot of people are really terrified of that because they're afraid of making a mistake. But the reality is there are only a handful of really, really deadly mushrooms. Most of them will just make you a bit sick. You don't want to make an error, however. Some of the mushroom poisonings can be so terrible that it defies belief. There's one toxin that doesn't manifest symptoms for 6 months. So you don't even know that you effed up for 6 months, and then all of a sudden you have convulsions, seizures, renal failure, rectal bleeding, you know what I mean? Just terrible melting from the inside like you have Ebola. So you don't want to make a mistake. But I have seen people that don't have this ability really to, if something looks a little bit similar, they don't have the capacity to distinguish between things. If you're one of those people, definitely don't get into this. And I'm not putting those people down. I'm just saying, I've noticed that there are people that just don't seem to have the ability to learn to recognize things that way. But if you do have that ability, it is not hard to tell what a matsutake is. It is not hard to identify a chanterelle. It's not hard to identify a bolete. It's not hard to tell which one they are. And you just have to learn, how to tell the difference between connected and disconnected gills, yeah, what a veil is, these basic mushroom identification. There's like a list of 10 things. You go through the list when you find a mushroom, and you can have a field guide right there with you to look at the, is it convex or is it, whatever. And you just go through the checklist. And, on top of that, there are mushroom groups on Facebook that are pretty reliable. You'll get a little bit of argument sometimes, but you can tell who knows what they're talking about. And here's the real kicker with this. Most of the really important mushrooms you're looking for don't look like anything else. They might have or lookalikes that people will, they say like this is a lookalike, but to me, it's easy. Once you know the mushroom, you're not going to make that mistake. So, like I said, you really need to make sure you know. But it's not rocket science. It's not that difficult, especially if you stick to chanterelles, boletes, black trumpets. Hedgehog mushrooms are impossible to mistake. There's only one mushroom that has the little thingies hanging down like that. Lion's mane is super easy to identify in the wild. Bearded tooth is easy. All of the important ones are highly distinctive. Nature knows what it's doing, And really, all of the really nice ones, you can tell they're food. You can tell they're food. The only ones that are really like the death cap will kill you, and the destroying angel, and they kind of look like food. I would say death caps. The color of the skin on the top of the cap is so unappetizing that I think most people would think it doesn't look like food. The destroying angel, however, being just solid white, that one I could see, and actually people that have eaten some and survived said it was amazing. So. And amanitas, it took me a long time to get up the courage to eat edible amanitas, even though I was positive about my identification. In the case of, what are they called? Spring, oh shit, I can't remember what they're called. There's spring amanitas, and they have like an orange top, and when you cut the stem, it's hollow. And they have a very distinct veil, and they have little white spots like fly agarics. Italians absolutely love them. But I was still scared to eat them just because it was an amanita, and I knew, what the destroying angel is, and that they also have a lot of poisonous members, Also, I would recommend that if you're going to get into this and you're not already, morels, some people will eat elven saddles, which are false morels. Do not do this. People become fanatical about it, right? And they say that if you cook off the toxin, that they're edible. It's not really true. People that consume them for a long time tend to die of liver failure eventually, or kidney failure. It's not safe. So if someone tells you that, I'm not saying that you couldn't try it because you won't die from just eating them if you cook them thoroughly. But I just don't think it's worth it. And the compound in them is called like gyromitrin, I think. Let me make sure. But it's rocket fuel. It's literally jet fuel. It's the same exact molecule. Gyromitrin. Yeah, gyromitra. No, gyromycin. The mushroom's Latin name is gyromitra. So yeah, it's gyromitrin. Not worth it. Not worth it, guys. False morels, they're also called. And no, you're not going to confuse them with regular morels. By the way, since we're talking about all this and the toxins, bruising blue does not mean it's psilocybin. If you watched my bolete video that I just made, there are blue boletes that are poisonous. Blue standing boletes, the Satan's bolete is sometimes fatal. There is the blue ink bolete, which is not, I don't think, edible at least. And then there are psychoactive boletes that stain blue that are not psilocybin. They don't know what's in them. And it's actually considered kind of a legend. Like it's not, I don't know that it's really confirmed. Although I think this guy, Byrne, did go out and eat a bunch of them, and now they called him Burns boletes because he's the one that confirmed. I think that's the story. I didn't read the whole thing, but it sounds like something to that effect has occurred, and I think it's real because the Chinese have like legends around it, and they have a name for it called Xiao Rin Rin, and so they call it Lilliputian hallucinations, which are visions of like gnomes and dwarves and elves and little people, which is really interesting to me that we have compounds that cause very specific types of hallucinations. But yeah, and not bruising blue does not mean that it's not a psilocybe mushroom. Uh, Liberty caps don't generally tend to bruise except around the base of the stems. Cyanescens is pretty hard to get them to bruise. They're just kind of woody, and there's like just nowhere for it to happen. It'll happen on the cap, but it kind of looks greenish because of the just the color and they're leathery little guys, you know. But yeah, so there's some more little tidbits. Check them out the chat again. See if we have morels, chanterelles, and lion manes are pretty tasty. That is absolutely factual. Reishi makes a great tea too. Golden teachers are good now and then as well. Of course they are. I hope to make it down to Peru one day. Sounds great. Come say hello. By the way, for those of you that are just tuning in, we have events in May in the jungle that will be more focused on ayahuasca, and in the Sacred Valley, which will also feature ayahuasca, but San Pedro. And there are other options on the table, but some things eliminate other things, so it depends on the individual needs, and that's a conversation we have during our interview to see if it's a good fit. And then in July, we are going way up high to have a solar ritual at the end of the retreat, and we're all going to consume a lot of colloidal gold, and then drink San Pedro, which is a medicine that puts you in touch with the light, way up high at some Incan ruin at really high altitude. So we're going to have to go up there too first and make sure that everyone can handle it before we go up there and start a ceremony and then have to bring someone down. So the acclimation will be kind of gradual though, because we're at about 13,000 where our property is, and we'll go up a few times pretty high, stay for a couple hours, make sure everyone can handle it. We also have what is that mineral that helps with altitude sickness that's only found super high up? Shilajit and coca leaves oxygenate the blood. And in fact, I'm about to stuff my face with some paste because I'm getting kind of tired. They get massive. Trichoceros trucic. Okay, I saw a question. Destroying angel described as delicious. Yeah, that's what people say, but don't eat it. Your thoughts on bee venom or combo venom? I don't know much about bee venom, but I do know that poison in small quantities is medicine, and medicine in large quantities is poison. So combo, I was very, very skeptical about for a long time because I took it and I have chronic issues and it didn't do anything for me. I didn't notice anything. But it takes a wrecking ball to affect me in any way, shape, or form, you know. I don't have a sensitive constitution at all. It doesn't matter whether it's intoxicants or medicine. You know, I need a huge dose in order for it to notice it even. So I was kind of skeptical, but I have met people that I know are reputable that have seen things that you cannot say are 100% proof of anything. Like there was a woman that came to my ayahuasca maestro years ago, and she had a tumor on her tongue that was massive, and combo over the course of a month or something, the tumor disappeared. And you cannot necessarily attribute that to combo. That's not scientific, but it is compelling anecdotal evidence, to say the least. And I also have used it to snap a person out of a psychosis. So it definitely has therapeutic applications for sure. Rape helped with that as well, but the combo really just brought this dude right back to ground level. I mean, no antipsychotics, no hospital visit, and it was pretty bad. Like hearing stuff and seeing things, and you know, delusions and the whole thing, and just like almost completely normal after one session. So, yeah, and then also more research has been done, and it is effective according to NCBI compilations at treating tumors and AIDS. Even it interrupts AIDS, so it doesn't cure it, but it stops developing. There's a whole huge list of all of the things that it does in my combo video on my channel. And also at our retreats, we actually have a Masis healer who is a member of the tribe that discovered rape. So the person that we work with is of the original Masis lineage that brought us the medicine. And also, I can't say how much of this situation is actually due to these plant medicines because she is also having mainstream treatment. But we had a stage 4 cancer survivor here a few months ago. And she, not only did she have radiation burns from the, it's like chemo pills. And after kashuru, which is Andean superfood algae, there's a video on the channel about that, and I can dry it and send it to you guys, by the way. If you're not consuming it, you're out of your mind, basically. It contains cytotoxins, which stop the replication of, or the cell division of cancer cells. And it is being looked at by governments to try to fix malnourishment because it's so nutritious. There are a huge number of benefits. They're basically these little green balls that are colonies of cyanobacteria. I'm going to have some Coca paste in a minute. I try not to have it during streams anymore, but we're just at such a high altitude that I just get tired. I have to. Sorry, guys. Cyanobacteria, colonies of it, and they can get as big as baseballs. Super crazy, and it has to be super clean water at high altitude lakes. And it's the Quechua use it as food. But it's just tremendous stuff. And so we were feeding her that with every meal and coca leaves. And just with those two things, her radiation burns disappeared almost entirely within the first 72 hours. It might have been 48 actually, but 2 or 3 days of this, and it was pretty bad when she got there, and it was almost gone almost immediately. So then combos seem to accelerate that, right? But then after being here for, I think she was here for 10 days, when she went back, because, when you have stage 4 cancer, the chances of remission, or what is it when it comes back? It's the opposite of remission. If it can come back, and there's still indicators that it was there. And they told her that there's not any sign of anything, and that it was literally miraculous. In the opinion of her doctors, it was on like worthy of the term medical miracle. So, in my personal opinion about that is that it is a combination of the plants that we gave her and the combo and the pharmacological treatment as well. These things can work together. So, and then also for addiction, people are using it, and it contains the most powerful opioid known to man in the toad. And I think that probably does it. I don't know exactly how to explain that, but I don't think we have a medical validation of this kind of concept that I'm thinking of, but it's similar to the way, another way to think about it is it's similar to the way that iboga works, right? People take iboga, and you can, as long as you don't have any opioids in your system at the time, you won't even have withdrawal. You just walk right out of a 40-year habit like nothing happened. And that is, well, sort of, in terms of withdrawal. And that is why most people can't quit once they get stuck. If you could get out without going through withdrawal, I bet people would not, the number of addicts in the world would be few, extremely few. You cannot have it in your system, you'll die. But it just resets. There's no withdrawal even. And so something along those lines, I think, is what happens with this combo. And what else does it do? There is a whole cocktail of bioactive peptides and analogs of other, it's crazy, the whole cocktail stuff in there. I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, it definitely is, in my opinion, algorithm. This is not medical advice. It definitely appears to be effective based on observation. Bufo also is, I mean, no one's brought that up yet, but 5-MeO is basically a way to turn off the entire reducing valve in the nervous system. And so, if you want to know what the ultimate reality is, that's how you do that. I really think that's what it is. It turns off, like most psychedelics turn down the filter, and 5-MeO turns it off completely at a sufficient dose. Yep. All right. So what do we got going on here? What are heroin and ayahuasca? What? What do you mean? How do you make sure that the magic mushrooms are 100% the right type? Higher grown coca are more potent. That is true. That is definitely true. Your thoughts on bee venom or combo? But also, every harvest of coca is different. Um, it's really a roll of the dice. They don't know what they're going to get in terms of the quality. And it kind of is a pain because when you find a farmer that you like their leaves, the next harvest they might be just useless, from our point of view. But it's also interesting to consider the Quechua don't really think about the alkaloid. Their main concern is a certain taste, agrio, something like sour. And there are, again, one of my videos, I have all of the alkaloids that are suspected to do these things, but there are cleansing agents basically in them that if you chew a ton of coca all day long, you'll smell like rotten buttholes. It's terrible. I mean, it's body odor smell, but it's way worse than normal. And it's because it's pushing all the stuff out of your body that shouldn't be there. It's extremely cleansing. It's really high in calcium, which is interesting because calcium's what's needed to activate the alkaloids. So it's like nature knew to put this in there with it. The fact that it helps with altitude sickness. We talk a lot about the intelligence in nature. Earlier, I mentioned Shilajit, and that's kind of when mystics talk about intelligence in the mineral kingdom. The fact that Shilajit is found only in the Himalayas at super high altitudes and helps with altitude sickness is what is meant by the intelligence of the mineral kingdom. So, but yeah, back to the coca thing. In the north, the leaves are very different. Northern Peru, and they're smaller, they're kind of wrinkly, and they taste really bad to us, but that's what they want. And my suspicion is that they're looking for the alkaloids in there, that other than the cocaine alkaloid, and that's what that taste is about. I don't know exactly which ones they are, but yeah, it's worth watching my coca video. It's actually the one on pancakes, the coca pancakes, because you can make flour out of the leaves and then use it as wheat flour. And activate it even by putting baking soda in it, so you eat your breakfast and you're ready to go. Um, yeah, tremendously wonderful medicine as well that I'm about to pack my cheeks with. How do you make sure that the magic mushrooms are 100% the right type? Why does it rot your teeth? It doesn't. Coca? I don't think it necessarily does. But it's not the coca; it's the activator. If something does, the coca chewers that I see around here, they're some of them have really bad teeth, but a lot of people that chew coca all day every day don't have any dental problems. I think it has more to do with the fact that they're just poor, and they don't have dental care, and they're also introducing outsider diet, with high sugar and a lot of processed food and whatnot. So it's the non-traditional diet, and the activator is very alkaline and probably does take some enamel off if you use it too often. But you can't live up here and not use it. You can't really. Okay, let me. Speaking of coca, let me pack my cheek real quick, and then once it's sufficiently out of the way that I don't sound like I'm talking with my mouth full, I'll resume. Alrighty. Um, the mushroom question is difficult to answer, but basically, you have to know what you're doing. A field guide may be sufficient for most people, but it's better to go with someone that knows once. You know, my experience is that once you have found a mushroom and you have positively identified it, if you see that mushroom again, you're going to know that it's that mushroom. You know what I mean? It's just like, do you know what a rose is? Do you know what a carnation or a, you know what I mean? It's not to me any more difficult than that. But if you are learning, you just have to be thorough, you know. And like I said earlier in the stream, there's a checklist. If it's cubensis that you're looking at, it should bruise blue after a few minutes, but not immediately upon handling usually. There's going to be a purple ring on the stem where the spores have fallen if the cap is opened. You know, it's going to be on manure and not near manure. You know, if you're looking for a wood rotting mushroom and it's growing in the dirt, it's not right, you know, or vice versa. If you're looking for a coprophilic mushroom and it's growing on a tree, not right. So you have to learn all the characteristics of the mushroom, and then you have to learn how to tell the different types of gills. So some are attached, some are adnexed. There's different, you know, are they close or far? So you go through the list in the field book, and then if you check everything correctly, and then also I would post it on a group to make sure for the first time on Facebook, a couple of groups, and if you get 100% the same identification, you know, but really I would recommend always going for the first time with someone that knows. For me, I don't have to do that. I'm confident with my checklist, you know, but it's I have observed people have such varying abilities in terms of the recognizing these subtle details that you can't really give blanket advice on this, you know. But yeah, checklist, thorough, Facebook groups, Reddit. But it's not that hard. You shouldn't have to go that far. And like I said earlier, the really significant mushroom species, the ones that you're going to be looking for, if you're looking for edibles or medicine or whatever, when you're going to get yourself into trouble is when people are trying to identify every edible mushroom. They want to know, like, you know, is this edible or not? And they just start eating everything they think is edible. If you stick to the major choice edibles, you know, and bolete, slippery jack, king boletes, white boletes, queen boletes, chanterelles, black trumpets, hedgehog mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, the psilocybe mushrooms are generally pretty easy to identify and pretty distinctive. You know what I mean? The chances of making a mistake, unless you're careless, are pretty low. So just don't try to eat everything. Only the important ones. If you stick to the important ones, nature made them pretty obvious. You know, that's the best advice I can give. By the way, you guys, please consider hitting the like button, sharing, and subscribing. We are demonetized, so we get no we get no support from YouTube. So if you appreciate this content, we really appreciate support. I'm also trying to raise money to offset having to cancel half of a year worth of events, and I have to get several surgeries. So we're kind of particularly in that fundraising mode. Really appreciate all the people that have made contributions. This community is very strong considering how small it is. And if you join the Patreon, you get access to 6 years of premium material. You can join our Discord private voice chats, which are full of really interesting people of like mind, and other benefits. I also do consultations on plant medicine, or if you're interested in learning about initiated traditions like the Western Mystery tradition, and sort of unlicensed therapeutic sessions. I am not a medical professional of any kind. Nothing that I say can ever be construed as medical advice. Please do not strike me down, almighty algorithm. But yeah, I offer all kinds of services, and you can check them out on my Patreon or shoot me an email if you're interested in guitar lessons as well. I teach online, so if you happen to be one of those few people that come here for the music, which is happening again tomorrow night, if you happen to play guitar, I do teach. All right. Do we have any more questions or subjects that you would like me to? What's going on, Mr. JD? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I have a lag, so I'll give it a minute to see if anything pops up in the um, chat. And otherwise, I'm actually thankful for this stream tonight because I feel like a seed was planted in my mind that is going to go somewhere. And oh, by the way, you guys, if you haven't watched the Eliphas Levi series, especially the one from last night, especially the second half, I think there's two chapters, the fourth and fifth, or the fifth and sixth. It's fifth and sixth, I think. Please do yourself a favor and go watch them. I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's my 2 cents. Is that if you haven't seen them, is you should watch them. But the idea of the mushroom mycelium functioning as a neural network and looking like neurons, there's another element of this, like the macrocosm microcosm thing. The universe looks like a bunch of neurons. You know, from certain vantage points and distances, there are a lot of they're not celestial bodies. What do you call it when there's a mass networks, galactic networks, that look like that as well. And there are, I believe, and this is supported by research, minerals that serve a purpose in this neural mycelial network function, right? The same way that we have magnetite and gold in our brains that facilitate the electrical activity and manage the fields and whatnot. And this is really important to me as from coming from the Hermetic point of view and looking for manifestations of these concepts like as above, so below. And I heard, what's her name? Sabine Hassenfelder, I think. She's a physicist, a very straight, mainstream up until recently. And, she's never said, I've never heard her say anything like this before. But a couple weeks ago, I saw she had posted a video that said, I think the universe can think. Or I believe the universe can think. And I was like, what? That's not you. Is this a joke? And I thought she was trolling. Because there's a lot of buzz about panpsychism and the possibility of a universal mind in, neuroscience and the study of consciousness, which is really being spearheaded by an anesthesiologist and a physicist for some reason, and not a group of neuroscientists. And even in evolutionary theory, there's some weird stuff going on that suggests that there is an intelligence that has oversight in the evolutionary process that is managing response-driven adaptations that are even aware of context like time being an issue, because these adaptations are happening within a season and not even a year, much less 10,000 or 100,000 or a million. So there's a lot of buzz about this, and I thought that she was trolling as a response, like, come on, you hippies, or whatever. But no, she was dead serious, and she said that the reason that door was opened for her was the discovery of entangled particles in the brain, specifically entangled biphoton pairs emerging from neurons. And it made her realize that one of the main material arguments against panpsychism is in the universe is the distances. Because in order for a meaningful cognition to occur that's, it's rapid enough, it has to happen in an enclosed space, due to the limits of the speed of light and whatnot. That was even a problem understanding how our brain could work without superconductors until the revelation that atomic processes can occur in the brain and that light can make gold a superconductor, and we have gold and light in the brain. So, but even in something the size of our heads, because it's so much processing needs to happen. Even something the size of our brain, it was difficult to imagine once you really realize exactly how much is being processed at once. So entanglement made her realize that the distance no longer had anything to do with processing for sentience. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't have a concrete thing here, but it's just when we were talking about how the mycelium looks like a neural network and it functions like one between species. And then I thought of these galaxies and whatnot that on a different level, and the mineral component, like in the mycelial networks and in our brains, and then we have the stars in these giant networks that look like mycelium. And at this point, in my shamanic journey, I guess, I know how this works. I know, what the book of allegory of nature is about. And it is a thing in South American shamanism, and it's a thing in the Hermetic tradition. The mystery school tradition is a very sophisticated shamanic lineage. The consumption of the Kaikion and the Eleusinian mysteries by Plato and Aristotle and all of these people. And a lesser known fact, I think, is that one of the main strategies, I guess, the protocol of initiation was to learn to read this book of allegories that nature provides for us. So I know that was vague, but I'm trying to work it out still, the connection between these things. And the way things have been going lately, you guys, I do not doubt that we'll have an answer in regards to this by next stream. Yeah, sure. I'll talk about Sheldrake and the consciousness of the sun. I don't really know anything about him, honestly. I might have a conversation with him because I've landed inside of his inner circle with people that he works with recently, accidentally, which was crazy because of all the intellectuals, even really Michael Levin in a sense, because I have more of a direct reason to talk to Sheldrake. I would love to talk to Levin, but I have a feeling that I would want to talk to him with cameras off because I think he's hesitant to say too much and discredit himself. I think he's more of a mystic than he's going to say on the Theory of Everything podcast or whatever. But Sheldrake, I always wrote off because I'm generally not a fan of like new agey pseudoscientist types. They always turn out to be frauds. And so I guess I had some bias about that. And I didn't really give him the time of day because I just, I already just jaded, is that the word, from giving these people a chance and then realizing like, oh my God, they're just making stuff up. Get burned out on that. That's why I hate those guys so much, because they discredit an entire movement, it's not even, they're discrediting reality. It's not even a movement. They're discrediting reality because they're encouraging people to maintain their focus on the sort of matrix illusion, right? So yeah, they suck, man. That's why it's so important to like vet the things you say and like really try to make sure your shit tracks with reality. But okay, so I have to share an experience, and I've talked about this many times on the channel before. So if you're a long-time follower and you've heard this before, I apologize for the redundancy. But I can't talk about this without sharing it again. So, I had a period in my life that I refer to as the Phoenix process. I've made a lot of videos about it, and it's basically marked by a steep increase in parapsychological type phenomena. There is actually a word for this in anthropology, essential schizophrenia. So it's not schizophrenia in the sense of a person that's like a paranoid schizophrenic. It actually refers to, like, it's kind of similar. There's a voice in your head and whatnot, but the voice is actually telling the truth. And the information that you get tends to be useful and relevant and true, and it's something that was identified with shamans, and that's where the term came from. It may have been Mircea Eliade, but at any rate, this is a standard experience for certain types of mystics and shamans. Shaman is a madman who has cured himself. And like I said, it's more like walking between worlds. In fact, when I was in this state, I was living in southwestern Colorado, and the natives, the Dene and the Ute there, of the Navajo, you would probably think of them if you're not from there, do not like white people. It's bad. I mean, people get, there's violence even sometimes, like out of nowhere at bars, and they just too many drinks, and tall white man sees, and he was a native guy, sees a college kid, and he's just mad, and he runs across, sticks a knife in the kid's head. The kid turns around, beats him to the ground. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, really tense. And so during this period, all of a sudden they were all talking to me. I'd be walking down the street, and a white man walking between worlds. You don't see that every day. So it's a tremendous thing to navigate. Let's put it that way. And so I had a lot of dissonance about it because I had a lot of skepticism. I was worried my mind might be melting or something. I wasn't doing any psychedelics, or very little, infrequently, and not large doses. I think I ate mushrooms like once or twice during the entire period. I think I smoked DMT in the early before it really started. And anyways, it turned out to be at this peak of a solar cycle, which we're going to get to. So I had this voice that would tell me things, and it would always be true. And I had rules because I wasn't really out of my mind. I was worried I might be, but I wasn't. And I wouldn't do anything that was bad or dangerous, or, I was like, as long as it's harmless and doesn't inconvenience me or anyone else too much, I'll play along just to see what this is, So I did that, and it always was fruitful. And so one day, it told me, you need to go out to the field across from the cave. There was an Anasazi cave that had like rock art and stuff in it, beautiful valley. And go out to the big rock in the field and sit on it and do a solar ritual. And I was like, all right, that fits the criteria. It's not going to hurt anything. I feel stupid, but I'll go. So I go out. There was a crossroads too. We were at a crossroads. Of course, I meet Hermes at the crossroads. It was perfect. We were right at the house on the corner of the crossroads. And so I go out to the rock, and I sit on the rock, and I'm thinking, I don't know. Well, actually, I started to turn around and go home. My phone beeps, and it's this weird message that later my friend told me he had no idea why he sent or what it meant. And it said, basically, you need to continue going to the field. But it's from this guy in my band, So at that point, I'm thinking, okay, whatever this is real, and I just need to cooperate. But I didn't know any solar rituals, so I was like, what am I even going to do out there? So I go out into the field, I sit on this rock, and the voice tells me, raise the energy. And I kind of argue, like, I don't know what that even means. And it's like, shut up, you've been doing this forever. Why do you play dumb? And I'm like, okay, so I sit lotus style and focus on raising the energy, just kind of feeling that. And I hear all the rattlesnakes in the field like light up their rattles. And I'm like, okay, this is real. Something is definitely happening. And I'm not going to go through it all again because I've talked about it on the channel a bunch of times, but it walked me through this process, and there were certain stages in it that I don't think I could have thought of on my own. For example, when things pass through the veil in the occult tradition, it's believed they're reversed, like a reflection reversing. And it mentioned that, and it said, what is your name backwards? My birth name is Harley. So I'm like, Yel Ra? And I'm here doing a solar ritual. Ra's the Egyptian sun god. I have trouble imagining coming up with that on my own. And it really did feel like talking to something else. So I go through this process with this thing, and I see purple tendrils like licking out of the sun all around the sun. And it looked real. And the other thing I noticed is I could look at the sun. It didn't damage my vision. It didn't hurt my eyes. But it was setting, so, it's safer. Either way, though, it was really strange. It felt really powerful. The rattlesnakes all responded when I raised the energy. The Yell Raw thing, and there's more I'm not going to talk about. But so it's over. I go back to the house. I had an interaction with one of the neighbors that was super weird. He was from Argentina, and he had like kind of like frizzy hair. And when he got close to me, it stood up a little bit. Like the loose ones were like static electricity, and other stuff. Like I said, I'm not going to tell the whole story. But I go home, and the next day I go to work. And I go into the gas station on my way to work to get a drink, and I see the newspaper says the biggest solar storm in 26,000 years estimated had occurred during this solar ritual. So to be clear, I'm not saying I caused it, but whatever took me out there knew it was going to happen. And fast forward about 6 months ago. Actually, there's more to the story that I should share, I guess, in this context. We are going to get to Rupert Sheldrake, though. So, I don't know, maybe a year ago or something, my partner, I told her that I felt like another round of this Phoenix process was coming. At this point, I hadn't yet learned that these solar cycles happen in 11-year cycles, which is the number of magical expansion as well, which is interesting that that's the number associated with magical expansion, and these solar cycles are 11-year cycles. So I did not know yet that another one of them was reaching its climax. And I just mentioned to my partner, I think another round of the Phoenix process is coming, but way more intense this time. And sure enough, the off-the-chart synchronicities started a couple days later. We were at a restaurant in Cusco, and I mentioned some Red Hot Chili Peppers song, and there's a Latin band playing. They're singing in Spanish. And right after I mentioned the song, they played that song by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It starts immediately after I mention it. And a lot of other stuff on that level, you know. So we noticed that. And then I find out that just like the last time, the solar cycle is reaching another peak, and that it's going to be more intense this time, which reflects my prediction about how the Phoenix process would be more intense because it's tied to the solar cycle. So about a month or two after that, I was doing a stream where I was talking about all this. And it wasn't necessarily about the solar cycles, though. It was just about evidence of the universal mind. And I compiled like a Michael Levin interview and that amazing physicist from back in the day, the implicit and explicit order guy, Bohm. Amazing person. And as I was getting ready to go live, my suggested had this Rupert Sheldrake is the sun conscious. And I didn't watch it first. And I was like, I'll throw this in too. So at the end, we watched that, and I reacted to it. And at one point, he says, I think these solar storms are an opportunity for us to communicate, for the sun to communicate with us. And I don't know if I agree exactly that it's literally the sun, but I do think that the solar discharges cause both an increased symmetry in the arrangement of particles in the electromagnetic field, and they just generally amplify it. So he's not wrong. I don't know that it's literally the sun. However, my understanding of consciousness on all of these scales is as follows. And this is partly reflected in Michael Levin's work on light cones, where you have quantum particles at the smallest scale, that their function is a type of intelligence. And then when they behave collectively to create larger things, that is collective behavior. And we don't think about it that way. We somehow think it's just, in our science, that it's just like this mechanism that's just doing shit, without a cause, or I don't know what they think exactly. I don't think they try to answer this shit. It's philosophical, right? So anyways, that's the smallest scale. So what is a particle really? A particle is a bunched up piece of field according to the standard perception of these things, right? It's almost like if you take a blanket and then you put a rubber band around it, that is the particle. So you have a point of electromagnetic density that has a function. That's what that is. And so that is the most fundamental level of consciousness, is what I'm positing. And so you scale that up and you have a human, right? Another level of consciousness. Our brains are loaded with magnetite, which creates a point of density in an electromagnetic field, and that's why we have the sophisticated consciousness. That's a big part of it. It gives structure and coherence and density to the field just in the same way that particles do. So now we have a more sophisticated manifestation, a vector of a sentient organism and one of these points of electromagnetic density. Scale that up to a star, and you have a super conscious being. And so the star is projecting its consciousness, its SOL, and you add an individual, and you have the individual soul, SOUL. You put you into the sun, and it's an individual soul. It's like the subconscious has been bleeding these things through and sign symbols, hints, and clues, writings on the wall. The rest is up to you, kind of thing. So I hope that makes sense. But that's my experience with Sheldrake, and so I know a woman who just published a book. She's going to be on to do an interview and promote, and also because I would just love to talk to her. I've known her for a long time, but we've never really had a face to face. Dr. Rachel Turetsky. She is a not just a PhD in psychology. I can't remember what the other degree is, but she actually has 2 degrees and then a pretty impressive resume. And so 2 of my biggest heroes were Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary. And Robert Anton Wilson was inspired by Leary's 8-circuit model, and she was inspired by both. And so it's really a kindred spirit in that sense. And so she wrote a book called the 8-circuit ascension model, and it's basically her in modern school of thoughts integrated with the Leary's and Robert Anton Wilson's version of Leary's 8-circuit model. And so it has a foreword by David J. Brown. David J. Brown is kind of a lesser-known Terence McKenna-like figure. He was pretty well known for a period in the late 90s as an author. I don't remember what he wrote. He just published another book on DMT entities, actually, that's doing pretty well. Turetsky's book is now #1 on the alternative psychology book billboard, whatever that is. And so David J. Brown, who did the foreword, did experiments with Rupert Sheldrake. And the experiments were basically, they proved telepathy in dogs. And I remember the experiment, my mom telling me about it. It was a long time ago. But basically the dogs knew when their owners are coming home. The minute they decide to come home, the dog reacts. And so I had heard of him because of that experiment as a child even. And then, I remember him. I never read his book, but in the late 90s, he had some notoriety as a leading psychedelic figure, right? So Turetsky has been trying to connect the 2 of us for years now, like just constantly tagging us and post together. And I did have an interview scheduled last year, but we had an issue and I couldn't do it. So I'm waiting to get a response from this gentleman. And what I'm hoping is that it could lead to a conversation with Sheldrake because they work together. So it's, kind of a shot in the dark at the moment, but it's definitely not out of the question. And I'm curious, what he would think of some of the things that I think, because he seems very intelligent and he's been thinking about this stuff for a long time. Okay, guys, I have been on for 2 hours. Oh, I'm watching from the beginning, so I'm far behind, but what do you think of Datura? That's the second time today I've been asked that for some reason. It wasn't during the stream, but it's dangerous, and it's a deliriant, and I think it damaged my vision permanently when I was a teenager, and it causes true hallucinations, and I've experienced that with Toei. And so one of the problems with it is that you cannot tell the difference between the visions and reality. They look just as real as everyday life. And that's part of what makes it dangerous, other than the toxicity. Like Datura stramonium is the 4th most toxic plant on Earth. So you're really in there, when you're messing with this poison path stuff. Zombies are made from a combination of Datura root, metalloides, I think it's Datura metalloides, and pufferfish venom, and some other. They make you appear dead, and there's an antidote, but you have got brain damage, so now you're a plantation slave, basically, long story short, in Haiti. It's an excellent, Toei at least, Brumansia is an excellent anti-inflammatory, and I sometimes have insomnia. It's great for that. But you got to know what you're doing. You have to be really careful. It's the only plant that in traditional South American shamanism, traditionally the shaman would drink ayahuasca and then he would work on the patient. The patient didn't drink the ayahuasca like people do now. And it's the only one that the patient only drinks it, and they overlook you because Scopolamine causes your suggestibility to be like you can tell people to do anything and they'll do it. And the spirits of the Datura world are said to be very impish, so they can be good, but they also will try to kill you. And one of the things they apparently like to do is tell people to drink sand. And you're extremely dehydrated when you use tropane alkaloids. So if you drink sand, you're going to choke to death. So the shaman has to watch over and make sure that you don't do what the spirits tell you to do. So it was what the flying ointments were used by the witches. In fact, the image of a witch flying around in a broomstick comes from the fact that they would use a broom handle to apply a paste made from mandrake and other Datura species through their vaginal walls, and then people would look over the fence or whatever and see them with the broom between their legs babbling about flying, and that's where the witch on a broomstick legend comes from. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they can be good medicine, but I don't really see the utility in taking them as like a psychonaut for sure. It doesn't make sense. In some extreme spiritual cases, I can imagine that there's some need to go into that space. But you also need to remember that unlike classical psychedelics, that people say this, but unless you're predisposed to mental illness, you're not going to go crazy from taking classical psychedelics. Datura, there's no guarantee you're coming back. And they actually say that the only way to get somebody back that gets lost out there is to send someone in there that has also drank it. You have to send a person into that world to drag them back out. And they have to take it in order to do that. So, for me, it's not something to use as an entheogen unless you have really serious cause and really know what you're doing. And, the preparation for that is pretty extensive. Definitely not to be taken lightly. But I can attest that the prophetic dreams that they claim happened, that's real. That's definitely real. And just the example that I'll give, I accidentally drank too much because I went to another country and the plant was stronger, and I cut the dose in half, but it was still too strong for just to use as insomnia, not dangerously strong, but strong enough to cause a full-on vision experience. And there was a guy at one point dressed like a professor with a stick pointing to the wall, and he was explaining this Egyptian motif that was on the wall. And the next day, I was generating a thumbnail, and the AI generated exactly that motif. And it's not something from Egypt. It's not real. I mean, maybe it is real, but you know what I mean? It's not something that like the AI would find online and go, oh, here's this Egyptian thing. It's not there. It was just the thing that the guy was explaining to me from my wall. The next day, the AI generated it precisely. So that aspect of it seems legitimate. But I would not go there if I was you. I can't imagine a reason that you would have that you would need to do that. One thing that you can do is people sometimes dry and smoke the flowers. The Shipibo do this, and that's not nearly as dangerous as consuming it in other forms. So, guys, I got to go. My voice is getting tired, and I still have a bunch of music to practice for tomorrow. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope it was informative and enlightening. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron because we're demonetized and we rely on the community to support us in order to validate all of the hours that we invest. And if you're interested in coming to an event, shoot me an email, or if you're interested in consultations or whatever. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Those of you that are interested in the music, really throwing myself back into that lately. And I think it's getting better. So hopefully join me for that. Friday, I'm going to do an expose on Elon Musk if we get back from Cusco in time. If not, it'll be Saturday. But it's not going to be an opinion piece. It's all backed with numbers and sources, and most of the sources are his own platform, his own AI. So really important stuff, man. People need to understand what's going on and not be fooled. Stop being fooled. If you're one of those people, you're being fooled. Stop it. It's not good. So thank you and good night.